What is up, everyone? Welcome back. Thank you very much for stopping in. So today we have 3 real-life occurrences, and I'm certain to an extent that these were actually very traumatizing, especially at these ages. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you to the authors for allowing me the opportunity to read them. If you're interested in reading them yourself, please check the description. I'm going to have the links to all their stories. That being said, if you guys do have a story you would like to submit, please check my description as well, as my email is going to be listed there. I'd love to hear from you. And if you do enjoy today's video, please be sure to hit that like button. Let's go ahead and get into our first story. It comes to us from Mike_RG over on Reddit, entitled Old Wooden House from My Childhood. In a word of introduction, it happened several years ago. I don't remember the exact date, but we can assume it was around 2007. I was about 8 years old then, but I still remember the whole event until today. At that time, I lived in a family house in the countryside in the southeast part of Poland. You can imagine that post-Soviet vibe. Nobody in the area had internet at home, and the most advanced technology available in the village was the Siemens C60, or another Nokia 3510i, if someone were rich enough. There was also another house in the yard next to our house, old, built entirely of wood, and already then out of use for a long time. From other people's stories, I know that the origins of this building date back to the end of the 1890s. Before the World Wars, that house served as kind of a village nursery and school for children. From my parents' reports, I know my grandparents lived in this place, and they themselves remember those years from their childhood. There is no dark secret associated with the building itself that I have ever heard of. Although I must admit that this house has always bothered me. During the day, nothing prevented me from walking freely next to him or even looking inside. However, when it was getting dark, I was even afraid to look at him through the windows of my family house. I felt a lot of stress and anxiety then, but of course, I didn't tell anyone about it. That building was in bad shape as long as I can remember it. Wooden logs were rotten, there were holes in the roof, and the windows were missing glass. These were sealed with old bags, effectively blocking greater part of the light that penetrated inside. I also remember to this day how while playing with a stick and a rotten beam, I found the fragment of a rifle bullet, a few centimeters long, a round piece of metal, crushed at its sharpened part, probably a memento from the First or Second World War. Getting to the story, it was summer, an ordinary sunny day. On days like this, I like to look inside the old house as the light that filled it looked almost magical. There was no darkness. Everything was sufficiently lit by streams of the sun. Back then, I liked rummaging in old cabinets and drawers and playing with the tools I found. At that time, this building served as our private shed, so all household tools were put there so that they would not take up space. I remember going inside and closing the door behind me. Why did I do this? I don't know. I never dared go inside alone with the door closed before. I probably wanted to calm down a bit and look for something interesting in old tools. After a few minutes, it began to seem as if I heard fewer and fewer outside sounds. The noise of the wind seemed to fade away. The birds seemed to wander away, escaping slowly with their singing. And then I heard it. Music seemed to be coming from the attic, a quiet, muffled tune from the gramophone. It sounded like the most typical music of the 20s. There was no one in the house except me. The building also did not have an electrical installation. However, I heard the melody coming from above the ceiling more and more clearly, as if someone were relaxing to the calm beats of a quiet melody. I left quickly from there, and when I was outside, I felt overwhelming, paralyzing fear. I heard the sound of the wind again, the singing of the birds and the sounds typical of the village. However, there was no trace of the music. I have not told anyone from my family about this so far. It seemed unreal to me then, as if it was just a dream. Several years have passed since then, and I can still remember the whole situation very well. It is not easy for me to believe in any paranormal phenomena, but I cannot explain what happened then. Was it real? Or maybe I had a very realistic dream that my childhood mind confused with reality. I have no idea. Now, I've never heard music, but I'm certain that I've heard full-blown conversations. It's creepy and eerie, and I can only assume at that age it was terrifying. Now, our next story comes from Radio OK 1463. This one's entitled, The Only Unusual Experience I Have Ever Had. This one goes back some 9 or 10 years now. My younger brother and I were home alone. I was 14, 15, so he was 11 or 12. This wasn't unusual. Our parents' shift patterns varied wildly, so this was commonplace in our lives. My grandmother on my mother's side had recently passed away. It is sad to say that I was mostly unaffected by this, as we were never close. She and my mother were estranged, so naturally, so were we. I was in my room and there was a huge bang that came from the kitchen, like pans being dropped and then a cupboard door being slammed. Because I was startled, I instantly ran to my bedroom door and shouted down at my brother to complain about the noise and to tell him to quit it. He then came out of his room across the landing and said it wasn't him, that he assumed it was me. Both clearly confused at this point, we headed downstairs and into the kitchen, only to find that nothing was out of place. We opened cupboards and everything was as it should be. I was ready to chalk it up as my neighbors being loud when we heard a bang come from upstairs. A little unnerved now, we walked back upstairs. The sound came from the front of the house, and as my parents' door was open, that is the room I checked first. This is where I noticed what was out of place. My mother had a vase with some faux flowers in it on the windowsill, which now lay on the floor at the base of the bed and away from the window. Next to my mother's side of the bed, on her side table, she had a photograph of my brother and I when we were very young. He was only a baby in it. That photograph was now face down on the drawers and the frame was cracked. I checked around the house to see if it could have been wind, but there were no windows open. It also doesn't make sense for it to be the wind, as the photograph was covered by a wardrobe. It would have to be gale force winds to even wobble it. I live in the UK, and earthquakes aren't commonplace, and nothing else in this house was out of place. I am very open to the paranormal and supernatural, and I really would like some concrete experiences, as this one is all speculation. I think due to the timing of my grandmother's death, and the fact that the age we were in the photograph was probably around the last time she saw us, I am hopeful that maybe it is her way of letting us know that she is watching us in her death, despite her absence in our lives. Just looking for some thoughts and opinions. I know it isn't the most exciting recount, but it's the only thing I've experienced that has made me feel like there was someone watching. Now, I don't think this was a malicious spirit at all, and there are certainly things that go bump in the night, but I think this was just someone who was just letting them know that they were being watched over. Our third and final story comes from Azalea 2812, entitled, The Scariest Day of My Life. Hi. Okay, so when it happened I was 15. I'm a girl, and I'm now 20. I was sleeping at my friend's house, so later that day, it was around October, she said, "Let's do some urbex. There's an abandoned factory near my house." I accepted. So when we were there, I started feeling weird, but I thought that was probably because it was new for me, exploring, blah blah blah. Everything went well, except the fact that I had this feeling of being spied on. After an hour of exploring, there was only one room left to visit, so I asked her, "What is behind that door?" She said, "Oh, nothing. It's the attic, nothing interesting. Also, there's a lot of wasp nests. You shouldn't go there." I was young and stupid, so I replied, "Don't worry, I'll go. And if I see nests, I'll quickly come back." The door was stuck, so I kicked it, and it opened. First thing I saw was wooden stairs. While climbing, I started having this weird feeling even more. It was scaring me a bit, but I was brave. So I looked at what was upstairs, and I could see a room with a big round window, and at that moment, I saw two walls right beside that room. It was round 1 meter wide. And that's when I saw eyes, looking at me. I was petrified. I couldn't look away, too scared it could move. After something like 5 minutes staring at that thing, I couldn't see his body. My friend asked me, "Is everything okay?" But I couldn't reply. The thing moved in my direction. That's when I started running on the stairs as fast as I could. I was skipping the steps 4 to 4, too afraid it could be faster than me. I screamed to my friend, "Run, just run." After being back home, I was shocked. We haven't talked about it much. I told her I saw something, but that's all. After months, we needed to walk past the factory to meet one of her friends. I was feeling spied again, but we could hear something following us in the forest. That wasn't fun at all. I could see a shadow here and there, but I chose to ignore it. Why? After leaving the forest, we were on a path in the field of tall grass. I stayed there near the forest waiting for my friend to come back because the other girl didn't like me at the time. Then I saw a shadow between 2 big trees, and before I could realize it, that shadow was in front of me in the tall grass. I couldn't see it well, but I was able to see its eyes looking at me. It was approaching me slowly. I was so scared, writing messages to my friend saying the thing was there. My friend took something like 2 minutes to see my messages, 2 minutes that looked like hours to me. From where she was, she could totally see what was behind the grass. She started screaming my name, telling me to join her as fast as possible. But I couldn't run. I had a feeling if I took my eyes off it, it could be dangerous, even more dangerous than now. So I walked backwards until I was with her, seeing the thing following me, and then it disappeared in a second. I was so scared, so once again, we ran away to her house, locking the doors. When I was in my room, I could hear weird sounds and see shadows. That was a nightmare. I wasn't able to sleep because the sounds were waking me up. I was feeling spied on in my own bedroom. So I tried to talk about it with my friend, and she refused to tell me what she saw. She just said, "It's not important to know what it was, because we won't go there again. Ever." After a while, someone told me to try to speak to that thing, ask it to let me alone, and that I was sorry if I did something wrong. And that's what I did. And since then, I never saw it or heard it again. I was genuinely scared. Sometimes I still feel this weird feeling, but not as much as before. That was my story. I don't know what it was, but I can assure you, I never tried exploring abandoned places again. Everything I wrote happened. I don't mind if you don't believe me, because that traumatized me for years. Now, I'm a firm believer that our primal instincts will never lead us astray. The fact that she knew not to turn away says that she was listening. I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that she was okay. Again, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of our authors for allowing me to read their stories. It's truly appreciated. Again, if you'd like to submit a story, check my description for my email. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them below. We'll see you next week.